When dealing with a client-server model, sure, you could use some weird over-engineered solution to indicate the state of the other party. Or you could use a very simple method like the status codes of HTTP. So you've probably seen codes like 404 not found, indicating the resource the server is trying to find cannot be found, usually indicating a broken or a dead link. But this can be further specialized into 410 gone, indicating the resource has been moved. But there are other codes like 502 bad gateway, and some of them don't even have to be negative things. Some of them can just say, hey, everything's working, like 200 okay. And there are tons of other codes for use in various different scenarios. And as is typically the case with anything related to the web, MDN is a great source of documentation explaining what the code is, what it means, and how it should typically be used. But there is one response code that stands out as really strange. 418, I'm a Teapot. The HTTP 418 I'm a Teapot client error response code indicates that the server refuses to brew coffee because it is permanently a teapot. A combined coffee/teapot that is temporarily out of coffee should instead return 503. This is obviously an April Fool's joke, but let's look at the history behind when it was defined, who defined it, and how it's actually been used, because some websites do actually use this for requests they just don't want to handle, such as automated queries, but more on that in a bit. This was first defined on April 1st, 1998 by Larry Macinta of Xerox PARC in RFC 2324, Hypertext Coffee Pot Control Protocol, HTC PCP version 1.0, and then further expanded upon in 2014, obviously on April 1st, by Imran Nazar of DeviantArt in RFC 7168. The Hypertext Coffee Pot Control Protocol for TFlux appliances, HTC PCP TEA. Now, like any good April Fool's joke, this is structured in a way that makes it seem like it might possibly be real. If you don't notice the date, if you don't notice how ridiculous it sounds, it all looks like it fits together as a proper RFC. And it's laid out like it should be. But when you start reading it, you start noticing something a little bit odd. There is coffee all over the world. Increasingly in a world in which computing is ubiquitous, the computers want to make coffee. Coffee brewing is an art. But the distributed intelligence of the web-connected world transcends art. Thus, there is a strong, dark, rich requirement for a protocol designed expressly for the brewing of coffee. Coffee is brewed using coffee pots. Networked coffee pots require a control protocol if they are to be controlled. Now, keep in mind, this is 1998. We're talking about networked coffee pots. Increasingly, home and consumer devices are being connected to the internet. We're not talking about like 2010, 2014, 2015. Like, this is 1998. Even though a lot of people still didn't have an internet connection in their house, we are already seeing the writing on the walls that everything in the future is going to be internet connected. On that note, it even talks about the IPv4 issue, the demand for ubiquitous appliance connectivity that is causing the consumption of the IPv4 address space. This is something that is probably maybe going to have to be dealt with at some point. We're still just putting it off. You know, IPv6 is certainly there, and we could start making our way over to migrating to it, but like, we're still sort of halfway in the middle of that migration. I don't know if that'll ever actually happen fully. Now, this RFC defines a couple of new methods and how existing methods should be used. The first method being the brew method, and the use of the post method. Commands to control a coffee pot are sent from client to coffee server using either the brew or post method, and a message body with content type set to application/coffee pot command. See, as I was saying, this reads like a totally normal RFC. a coffee pot server must accept both the brew and post method equivalently. However, the use of post for causing actions to happen is deprecated. This was literally released and they already deprecated the method. Like, there's no previous existing use of controlling coffee pots using post, but it's already deprecated. And possibly my favorite line, coffee pots heat water using electronic mechanisms, so there is no fire. Thus, no firewalls are necessary, and firewall control policy is irrelevant. Now, in HTTP/PCP, the GET method isn't very useful. So in HTTP, the GET method is used to mean retrieve whatever information in the form of an entity identified by the request URI. But in HTTP/PCP, the resources associated with a coffee pot are physical and not information resources. The data for most coffee URIs contain no caffeine. It's a physical coffee pot. What data are you retrieving? Just make the coffee. Unless it is a digital coffee, in which case you can use the prop find method. If a cup of coffee is data, metadata about the brewed resource is discovered using the prop find method. And the final method, when. When coffee is poured and milk is offered, it is necessary for the holder of the recipient of milk to say when, at the time when sufficient milk has been introduced into the coffee. For this purpose, the when method has been added to HTTP/PCP. Enough, say when. And if we scroll further down to the 2.3.2 section, this is where it defines the actual error code. 418, I'm a teapot. Any attempt to brew coffee with a teapot should result in the error code 418, I'm a teapot. Because, as we know, you don't brew coffee in a teapot. You brew tea in a teapot and coffee in a coffee pot. Now, the second RFC understands there's not really any reason to have a coffee-specific protocol. You should have something regarding brewing drinks generally, because maybe you want to brew tea as well. So this is for tea efflux appliances. Now, you probably have no idea what efflux means. Basically, it just means flowing. So this is an appliance that has tea flowing out of it, as in a teapot. As noted in the Hypertext Coffee Pot Control Protocol, coffee is renowned worldwide as an artfully brewed caffeinated beverage. But coffee shares this quality with many other varied preparations based on the filtration of plant material. Foremost among these are the category of brews based on the straining of water through prepared leaves from a tea tree, basically dirty tree water. The lineage and history of the tea genus will not be recounted as part of this paper, but evidence shows that the production of tea existed many thousands of years ago. But the deficiency of HTTP/PCP in addressing the network production of such a venerable beverage as tea is noteworthy. Indeed, the only provision given for network teapots is that they not respond to requests for the production of coffee, which, while eminently reasonable, does not allow for communication with the teapot for its intended purpose. So, I'll leave both these RFCs in the description down below if you'd like to go and read them through for yourself. I highly recommend it. They are certainly worth the read. Now, being an April Fool's joke, it's not exactly a real error code. So if we go over to the IANA, this is the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, and we go down to 418. We'll see that 418 is unused. Now, here's the thing about standards bodies. Your standards only matter if people actually respect them. So even though this isn't a real status code, that doesn't stop developers using it in production systems. For example, NPM under certain situations is going to return 418, I'm a teapot. Flight Radar 24 will do the same, so will DuckDuckGo, so will Apache, and so will Stack Overflow itself. I can't speak for whether they're in use in today's version of the system, but all of these have been used in the past, and without a doubt, there are other systems in production that under really weird situations will return 418, I'm a teapot. And no, in these cases, it's not because someone is trying to brew coffee in a teapot. Maybe there are some cases out there, but usually there are two situations where this is going to be returned. One, you're doing something incredibly stupid, and the server's just like, I'm a teapot, bro. I don't know what to do with that. The second thing is the server just doesn't want to deal with what you're trying to do. Maybe it's a bunch of automated responses or some other thing where they're like, you know what? Go away. Here, have a status code that you probably never see and don't know what to do with it. And for some situations, it'll be used as a final catch-all error code where if somehow it gets through all of the other error checking, it's like, I'm a teapot. Sometimes with doing that, though, you miss some cases where things should be checked. It's normal sort of usage, and you get this response code instead. That's just bad programming practices, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If your application breaks with a weird status code, there's a problem with your application. And my favorite thing about this entire situation is this issue from 2017 on the Node GitHub repo. This is from Mark Nottingham, who at the time was the chairman of the IETF HTTP working group. Basically, the people that define HTTP. And he didn't like that this error code was in use in a production system that people could actually go and use. He wanted it removed. While we have a number of spare 4xx HTTP status codes that are unregistered now, the semantics of HTTP are something that hopefully are going to last for a long time, so one day we may need that code point. Please consider removing support for 418 from Node, since it's not an HTTP status code even by its own definition. I know it's amusing, I know that a few people have knocked up implementations for fun, but it shouldn't pollute the core protocol. Folks can extend Node easily enough if they want to play with non-standard semantics. The problem is that it was in use in production systems, so if they decided to actually use it, you would then have these production systems that have this error code that doesn't line up with what it's supposed to be doing. And that would be really strange. The other thing, right, is there's nothing stopping HTTP from expanding the range of HTTP status codes. There is absolutely no need to only use 418. If you need to go to 1,000, you can do that. You are the standards body. You can define a bigger range. As you might expect, this saw quite a bit of backlash from developers. There were a couple of people in response, but most people like, no, that's not going to happen. Like, what are you talking about? And eventually, this did get closed, saying, all thank you for the amusing and fun feedback. It pleases us all to no end that the most beloved feature of Node.js is a teapot. I think it's safe for us to leave this as is for now. I'm closing the issue, and just to avoid keeping this issue from growing indefinitely for all of time, I'm going to lock it. This is probably a good idea. There's a lot of issues out there that end up being just plagued with comments for years and years to come, and it's really hard to find out what was actually being said at the time. Sleep in comfort tonight knowing that at least for the foreseeable future, your Node.js web applications can proudly proclaim that they, too, are teapots. And that's a good thing. I'm very happy that Node basically was like, yeah, we're gonna do this, so like, no. Once again, if nobody respects the standards body has no power. As such, when Mark Nottingham went to make the same plea over on Golang and ASP.NET, he got basically the same response and got laughed out of the room because nobody cares. 418 is in use, so it doesn't matter if it's not official, it is a real status code, much like Nginx's 444. There is a lot of interesting arguments being made in these threads. Maybe I'll do a dedicated video on specifically that. I don't know, we'll see if it happens in the future. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Have you seen 418 in production? Do you use 418 in production? Maybe you use it in a test system or something like that. I would love to know. So if you like the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one over these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Liberapay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and I'm a teapot.